I wore really ridiculous shoes, so I'm just preempting a trip and fall here. So yeah, I'm on the road, which is why this is sort of apropos, because I've been staying in all these really nasty, seedy hotel rooms and sort of living out of my trunk, which is, you'll see why after this story. This is called Suburban Girl. The crimes that would be perpetrated against me were clear. The kidnappers would ascend to the second floor of our suburban home, slice past the screen, pry open the window and find me, the victim, lying innocently in my bed. There would be two men, one fat and one skinny, one stupid and one smart. They would tell me not to scream, that they wouldn't hurt me so long as I kept quiet. Then they would wrap me in a blanket, toss me over a shoulder, and whisk me into the night. This was my 6-year-old fantasy. Coming from the suburbs, my parents gave us warnings, but we were never close enough to truly understand life's dangers. After dinner, we would have instructional after-school special type talks about house fires, drugs, alcohol, sex, kidnapping, all hazards presented with the comfort of a casserole. My father mapped out the fire escapes from each of our bedroom windows. His deterrent sex talk hinged on a Jonathan Edwards, sinners in the hands of an angry God type metaphor. It's just like fire, you don't want to get too close. The idea of burning or catching was supposed to make sex something to fear, like hell. My father, however, wasn't a religious person, though he once stuttered through an abstinence-only sex talk for the sake of my Catholic mother, who sat, purse-lipped, kicking my father under the table to goad us towards a pure life. When I was 16, he furtively tucked Planned Parenthood pamphlets under my door as if to say, self-immolation or not, just please don't get pregnant. Once my father made a family tree and circled the names of all the alcoholics, the ones who died from alcoholism got a star. My hereditary line hung heavy with circles and stars. While I was supposed to take heed of my genetic penchant for drinking, I hung the family tree full of floating shapes above my bed, and I imagined the wandering, starry, perilous lives of those alcoholics. I wondered what stories they would have to tell. Each of these conversations only sparked more questions for me, opening up a world and a reality that my parents had worked desperately to keep hidden. When it was time for bed, I would beg my father to go through the stories again. Do the kidnapping one. And he would repeat the lessons. Well, someday you might be alone and a man might try to grab you. Well, then he would tickle me and I would laugh and then I would interject, what could happen? What could happen? Well, he never got to that part. I knew it was something terrible, but that terrible was at the very least exciting. Early one school year, a vibrantly horrified PTA was buzzing because a man in a windowless van had attempted to abduct a girl in our neighborhood. I overheard the details: a masked offender, a sliding door. He snatched up the 5th grader from her bus stop, but she kicked and screamed and made so much noise that he suspended the mission. The takeaway here was never to get into a van with a stranger and make noise and try to fight off any assailant if you're having a near abduction experience. I stood close and listened to the outraged mothers continue to invoke the horror. I just can't believe it. It's so awful. Can you imagine? And in our neighborhood? I never thought something like this could happen. I had only one feeling, and it wasn't fear. I was jealous. And I saw opportunity. I knew there must be a kidnapper lurking somewhere in the subdivision. I wanted a crack at being the victim. The next day I found a major intersection in the suburb. There were 4 very critical stop signs. I sat down on the curb and peeled string cheese. I crossed my legs and tried to be seductive. I already knew what I would do, which was the direct opposite of what I was instructed to do. If they offered me candy, I would smile wide, like I'd never tasted candy in my life. If they said they needed help finding a dog, I would say, I think I saw him up the street, let me help. If they said that my parents had been in a car accident, I would tilt my head naively and ask, really? An accident? What happened? Are they okay? Fully aware that we would not be on our way to the hospital. Once at a mall, I hid in a clothes rack until my family had wandered off. I stepped out and waited for a perpetrator. My kidnapping plan was foiled within 20 minutes when I was picked up by the security guards. They took me to a private room where I watched the monitors of surveillance cameras scanning the mall for my family. I almost hesitated when they zoomed in on my father in his polo shirt, his khaki pants and loafers, my mother's tapered Jordache jeans, and the bobbling innocent heads of my brother and sister. Begrudgingly, I conceded and sighed. Yes, that's them. A few minutes later, my parents entered the security room and took me in their arms. Before I could engineer another escape, I was strapped in the minivan and shipped back to the suburbs. When I was 13, I started to sneak on the bus to downtown Seattle. I looked longingly down dark alleys, watched homeless people, and observed the twitching drug addicts and the trolling prostitutes on the back streets near Pike Place Market. Getting closer didn't invoke fear. I wanted to understand these lives that were so foreign to me. I saw that there was something mysterious in a life of danger, that is a life that has been lived. Leaving for college meant that I was finally breaking away. I thought about the places that seemed most dangerous, the ones that invoke scenes of crime and mystery and fear. I thought about the seediest place in the country. A place full of sordid characters where I imagined dead bodies and muggings and clandestine desert burials. Tucson, Arizona. This was a starting point. We took midnight trips across the border into Mexico. A few years later, I moved to Manhattan and lived in an ominous studio apartment on Avenue D. Later, I started cross-country trips, staying in motels with flashing lights or flashing signs on the interstate. I have parked my car and slept in New Orleans alleys post-Katrina. I've wandered alone in the back streets of Bangkok, climbed to rooftops with drifters in Morocco, and jumped on the back of motorcycles with strangers in Vietnam. Nothing. Danger has always seemed to permeate and lurk, but never to touch me. At night, I still fall asleep to the lull of police procedurals and real-life crime stories. 48 Hours Mystery, Law and Order, SVU, Dateline, and CSI. I throw words like perp into my daily vocabulary. Sometimes I have fantasies about finding a dead body. On my morning run, I have looked for a protruding limb, a noticeable stench coming out of the trash bin, or a swollen body floating in off the coast. I think if I do stumble upon a dead body, that maybe I wouldn't call the police. Like I would already know how to handle it. Looks like we're going to need a rape kit for this one. I have learned the investigative techniques, scrubbing the fingernails for DNA, the examination of blood spray patterns, fingerprinting methods, how to test skin for gunpowder. I know expressions like rigor mortis and putrefaction. I have considered the role of the entomologist and the stages of larvae, or how the settling of blood can determine the hour of death. I've explored near desolate paths and alleys, engaged recklessly, never indifferent, but affixed to the possibility of crime. But there is always a distance. The windows are still there. I gaze freely. These are the things that could never happen to me. These are fantasies only a suburban girl can have.